Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, dear viewers. Let me welcome you to another episode of Sirat al-Mustaqim, the straight path, my journey in Islam and events that took place as I followed the path. So this episode I'd like to focus on leading up to my marriage in Islam and the actual marriage in Islam. Okay, so I've already said that I'd moved to a hostel and that there were PhD students there from various countries, Pakistan, India, Iran, as well as the United Kingdom, and that someone had explained the meaning of Al-Fatiha and with respect to prayer and Hadith Qudsi. And from this, the explanation of the Fatiha actually brought tears to my eyes, and the explanation of the prayer, where it's a dialogue between the worshipper and the worshipped, had an impact. And I went along to the Information Bureau in Oxford, the city closest to me, and asked for information on Islam. And from there I got to an imam, and then from there I got some knowledge about Islam. Now, the person who had explained this meaning of the Al-Fatiha, they finished their degree and they were going back to Pakistan, and of course they went back to Pakistan. I had said the Shahada in 1970. They went back in 1972, and I used to write to the person in postcards on the basis of people that we both knew and my experiences as a new Muslim. And then I started to talk to some Muslims in this country, because I realized that this person I had a much deeper understanding in terms of conversation. When we were talking, it was as if we had a private conversation in a group, because our level of understanding was so much deeper. And someone said that it's like a joining of the minds, but some people wouldn't even know what we were talking about. The meaning we had was so deep. And I began to wonder about what did it really mean in terms of marriage or a life partner? What was I looking for? By now I was about 33, 34 years old, and so I wasn't a young person, I was a bit more mature. What was I looking for in a life partner? And I realized that this understanding was really the sort of thing that I would have preferred in a life partner. So I said to people in this country, how do you get married in Islam? Oh, they said, you can't talk about yourself, you have to get someone to take your case to the family for you. Well, of course, I knew no one in Pakistan, so that was out of the question. And her father had died, so I wrote to her brother, not knowing any better, introduced myself and mentioned that I'd like to get married. I was a Muslim. I got a letter back which wasn't exactly complimentary. It referred to, we don't want to hear anything more from you. Don't have anything to do with my sister, and it will be the worse for you if you do. And we have a cemetery here for people like you, white people, etc., etc., etc. So this didn't sound particularly encouraging, and the problem was, if I was serious, and I was, how to turn it around so that we could laugh about it later. Because I couldn't let it build up, and I couldn't let it stay as a serious issue that was actually between us, the family and I. So I had to, if you like, defuse that, but how to do it? Well, I came up with the idea of writing back and saying that you're challenging, and since I'm challenged, I have choice of weapons. I accept the challenge, and I choose water pistols. Okay? So from time to time, I didn't get another letter back, by the way, okay, not surprising, but from time to time I sent postcards, and at the bottom I would write, P.S. how is your brother getting on with his water pistols? I'm getting an expert with mine. Okay. And this went on and on for a while, and unknown to me, he actually wrote to the Imam in Oxford, and he asked him for a reference, and the man actually told him that you would have to go a long way to find a serious practicing Muslim like him, like me. So I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, after a year I was invited over to Pakistan. Okay, so of course I was a little bit sort of apprehensive, And I went and we got to the airport, and the brother, his mother and the sister met me, and we're driving back towards the house, and he points out this cemetery where the Christians are buried. So I wondered what was behind that. And then we got to the house, and I'd taken 2 suitcases, one with clothes for myself and the other one with some gifts. So I opened the one with the gifts, and I took out a pair of beautifully matched water pistols and walked over to him, and I said, choose one. And he looked up at me and he got up and embraced me, and that was the beginning of a very beautiful relationship, alhamdulillah. There was no animosity, no reservation after that. It was all straightforward, alhamdulillah. So that was good, and I was actually pleased that I thought about water pistols, but I didn't know what else to do. And you know, if I asked anyone, they didn't know what to do anyway. So you know, it was just one of those things that happened to work out, alhamdulillah. And after the sister came up to me one day and she said to me, "I'm very upset with you." I said, "Why's that?" She said, "You're taking my sister away from me." I said, "No, don't look at it like that." I said, "You're gaining a brother." And then she was happy. So these sort of things were quite good, alhamdulillah. And the relationship actually got better and better and better, because the brother came to Saudi Arabia when he was married, and he had 2 kids or 3 kids, and they used to come and stay with us, and we had a good time together all round after that. We even went all around Pakistan with his new wife, my wife, him and their mother, you know, so alhamdulillah, we really got on well together. And my wife and this brother had been very, very close all their lives. He'd gone to work in Baghdad, and she had gone to be with him, and the mother had gone as well, and she'd actually ended up as a lecturer in the University of Baghdad. So, you know, this was the sort of thing that was going on, and they were so close together that when I did come into it, I actually joined in the group as well, which was, you know, fantastic really, considering that the culture is so different, our backgrounds were so different. But it all just worked out, and say we had this tremendous understanding, and that stayed with us all our lives, alhamdulillah. So it was a very good situation and a very happy one. And then wanted to come back to take my wife back to the UK, so I phoned up the British consul and I said to him, "I'm English, son of English parents, and I've just married a local girl. I'd like to take her back to the UK. What do I have to do?" "Oh, you have to come and see me," he said. So he went to the consulate to see him, and his first comment was, "Oh," he said, "you know, you have to apply for an interview. We have to write off to the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office has to write to the Home Office. Home Office has to evaluate certain things. Then they write back to the Foreign Office. Then the Foreign Office writes back to us. And then we can talk about setting a date for an interview. But before all that, that's taken 6 months. What are you going to do?" I said, "Well," there's no point in my going back to the UK. I'll cable my company that I'm unavoidably detained and I'll wait here." I said, "But you can't do anything here." I said, "I can't do anything there either, can I?" So he sort of swallowed, and then he called for Queen's regulations, and he's thumbing through it, and he says, "Ah, yes, there's something here." He says, "She can come back as your fiancée." So my wife says, "I'm not coming back as your girlfriend, I'm your wife." Keep quiet. And we got the visa, alhamdulillah. And then we got the tickets changed to go through Saudi Arabia, and we actually did Umrah on the way back to the UK, alhamdulillah. So in that sense, everything worked out very well indeed. And I'll stop there at the end of this part for a short break, and inshallah we'll come back again after the short break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear viewers. This is continuing the part of Sirat al-Mustaqim, and in this part I'd like to focus a little more on my relationships and social interaction with the opposite sex and with the family that I married into. In my own case, I was about 17 years old before I had a first girlfriend, and I was somewhat shy, reserved, and I was not particularly outgoing, and I didn't really chase girls in the sense that a lot of boys did. I was much more, how should I put it, conservative, withdrawn, whatever you want to call it, okay? And I didn't really have a regular girlfriend for a long time. In fact, many years. In fact, I doubt if I ever really had a long-term girlfriend, and I didn't have many girlfriends either. Partly because I was studying and partly because I was moving from one company to another. And maybe I just didn't have the right approach, I don't know, but whatever it was, I didn't seem to have long-term relationships with girls, and I didn't seem to have any deep relationship with anyone in terms of the opposite sex. So when we used to talk in the circles, the younger circle, in the hostel, it was a senior hostel and there were elderly staff there, and they used to lay back in the lounge with the newspaper over their faces and go to sleep, and the sort of comment I made was that you can only tell what day they died by reading the newspaper date, and that would tell you, okay? But the younger generation, we used to sit together and we would argue politics or religion, some cases do the crossword, and that was basically what happened. And so there was no dating as such between myself and my wife-to-be. All that happened was that we were talking in groups, and we just had this understanding. Sometimes there might only be one other person present, but at least it was not a how shall I put it, it wasn't a love affair in any sense of the word. And that was the way that we were, and that's the way the relationship developed. And she knew I became Muslim, and she knew it was because of what she had said, and she offered me a book on Islam to read, which was not the easiest one. Frithjof Schuon's Understanding Islam. I got as far as the introduction, managed to understand most of that, but after that most of the book didn't mean that much to me. It was far too advanced for me at that stage. Anyway, then we just had this sort of understanding, and we would just sort of talk and in a group, and go out. If we went out with a group. We used to go to a coffee shop, if you want to call it a coffee shop, but a place where we could get a tea. And also there was an open theatre which a play group had in someone's garden locally, and we used to go and watch Shakespeare plays there from time to time. But 3 or 4 of us, not just the 2 of us, okay? So in that sense we didn't really do anything on our own, which was quite good, and it was a bit unusual, and in that sense it was not a close relationship in one way, but a very deep relationship in another way. Intellectually it was very deep. Physically there was no relationship as such, and that was quite good, I thought. So when she went back to Pakistan, this sort of left a hole in my life, and I was wondering, what does one really look for in marriage? And I came to the conclusion that she would make an ideal life partner, and that's why I followed it up in the way that I did. And then came the relationships with the family, and how to handle cultural differences and things like this. And one of the things that we did when we were first married, the very first night, we sat down and we talked about how we would spend our life together. And just talking about interaction with different cultures, and perhaps the first culture that I really came in contact with was when I was in Glasgow. I actually was playing bridge quite a lot, and my partner was a Jew, and I wasn't Muslim at this time. Okay, this was about 1965. I was there from 1965 to 1968, and I was playing bridge at a fairly high level, and we were winning tournaments occasionally, okay, but he wasn't married, and neither was I, so we naturally had sort of a social relationship, if you like. I used to go to his house sometimes, have a meal sometimes, we'd go fishing together, and as well as playing bridge, and we'd go to congresses together, and at congresses we'd even play golf together, so, or try anyway. I mean, I hacked around, but he'd had some lessons. So I interacted with him quite well, and didn't have a problem as such, but I wasn't Muslim then, of course. And I don't think I would have had a problem after I became Muslim, because I was in contact with him for a little while when I first got married, and then I left the country, so I lost touch with him then. But that was the first interaction. And I guess that meant that I had a broader perspective in terms of things, and maybe a certain tolerance level for other things. So I didn't really mind people were what they were. I took them at face value, and whatever I found out about them was the way that I looked at them, you know. But in general, my initial feeling was always that people are good and inherently good, so you look for the good in people. And then when I went to Pakistan, and I wanted to, and I also had a young man who had come from Kenya. He was a Muslim, and he was working in the department I was working in. The computer manager asked me to review him, and I did. And there were various things which had been done which were unfair to him. They said that he was skipping his classes in studying, and the reason was that it was on a Monday and he was looking for a house for his parents, and when they found one over the weekend, of course they went to the estate agent on the Monday. He'd already cleared all this with the computer manager, but the computer manager hadn't realised that that was the same day as his studies, so he was saying that he was missing his studies, and therefore they didn't want to employ him. Well, I came up with a solution that you extend the probation period and put him on shift so that he identifies with a shift rather than as a loner on his own on the rest of the days. So they did that, and of course they put him on my shift. And he actually was quite good and very friendly, and he found out that I was Muslim, of course, and he would bring food in the evenings which we could all eat. And in particular, he would bring a case of mangoes when it was the season. And they don't last all that long in this country, but when they do come, it's nice to get them at the right time. And one day I was in the hostel and I wasn't well and I was in bed, and one of the people from Pinstek in Pakistan who was there at that time, he came into the room to see me, just to visit me, and we were talking, and I said to him, put your hand in that box there and take out what you find. And he was very apprehensive. He didn't want to put his hand into the box at all. So eventually I persuaded him to, and he put his hand in, and when he found out they were mangoes, he couldn't put his hand in often enough. So this was one way to get through in the culture. But he was friendly before that, but he enjoyed the mangoes as well as I did, okay? So that's another way to break down barriers, I think, in certain cultures anyway. And an Egyptian friend tells me that they can do that with Egyptians too, so there's another hint, all right? So anyway, then when I went to Pakistan, I didn't know this at the time, but I found out later on that my wife's grandfather was actually an Englishman. Okay, he'd stayed over after the British in India and had married someone in India. And then when the family migrated from India to Pakistan, of course, he had died. But there was that awareness of Englishmen in the family from way back, okay? But no one knew anything about this, or I didn't know anything about this until years later, okay? But then when I was talking to them, the mother had some affinity for me. She said that he seemed a nice man. And it was only the brother that had the animosity, and this was because he was trying to protect his sister, of course, and one can understand that. But when he met me, and he began to find out the type of person I was, and I was going to the mosque 5 times, and actually in the UK, only Muslims I'd met was in the mosque, so I thought all Muslims went to the mosque. When I went to Pakistan or any other Muslim country, I got the shock of my life, really. But anyway, so he was in tune with me in that sense, and we got on very well indeed. And then I said to my wife and I, when we were first married, we sort of sat down and said, what should we do? Because we're coming from different backgrounds. Her understanding of English was textbook English, and my understanding of English is colloquial English, and there's a big difference, as we found out. You say something sometimes and it's taken literally, and it shouldn't be, so it creates a misunderstanding. So had to be careful along those lines. That was one aspect of it. But then we said, well, look, if we've got cultural background differences, how will we resolve them? And the best way was to take which was most Islamic, okay? They may not be really Islamic, but which was closest to Islam. That's the way we interpreted it. So that was the final stage in terms of that aspect. But we also needed, we didn't want to criticize one another. Okay, we wanted to encourage. So the idea was not to talk about the bad points, but to encourage the good points. And then we always wanted to make up before we slept so that we didn't carry any disagreements over into the next day and stop talking or anything like that. And my wife told me that she didn't want to be cursed by 70,000 angels, so that was another aspect to it, okay? So this was a sort of way that we resolved any cultural differences between ourselves. We resolved the cultural differences with the family. They'd already been indoctrinated from the British way, or from the British in one sense, good or bad, by the way. Not all good, but anyway, alhamdulillah. So that's what happened, and it all worked out for the best. So I'll stop here, and this is the end of this episode, and inshallah we'll meet again for another episode soon. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.